Welcome to the Tradies in Business podcast with your hosts Warwick Bidwell and Nicole Cox. Divert your phone and grab a brew as Waz and Nic unpack tips, tales, secrets and stuff-ups from guests both inside and outside your trade, helping educate and inspire you to break the cycle of gut-busting and money stress and create a true trade business.
Hello, listeners.
Hello, listeners.
Do you feel like you've heard that a few times on the podcast?
Well, as I said it, I thought, I don't feel like I've said this for a long time.
We haven't recorded for a few days. I've been off traipsing around Tasmania's east coast.
Literally traipsing around.
Yes, dragging a pack and a wife around behind me.
Actually, that's a great segue, dragging a pack.
Oh my gosh, talk about baggage.
Oh, sorry, listeners.
Here we go again.
Here we go again.
Look, it's hump day here at Tradies in Business, coming at you via the podcast. Thanks for tuning in as always. There will be more episodes from here on in because in case you live under more of a media rock than I do, and ignore the news and social media completely, you would probably know that Victoria is in a spot of bother with COVID, and the decision's been made to go back to stage 4 restrictions. I don't like using, that sort of language like lockdown and down, all that stuff. It's like when Tassie was one of the early ones to close their borders. It's like we didn't close our borders. You can still come and go. There's just some conditions. Now, some of them are pretty hardcore, but I feel like the language gets a bit off, Coxie.
I've also noticed, actually, to talk to language, and I actually think that's something we'll talk to a lot about in the last few weeks, is the news is now, once upon a time, there'd only be breaking news, or there's another term that they use, if it was something really important that you needed to pay attention to right now. And of course, all news is very important, but every news bulletin now is this extreme version of the news. It's not just news, and it is just news, although I'm sure if you live in Victoria, it doesn't feel like just news today.
No. And it is, it's been interesting chatting with some of our Victorian, I can't say brethren because it sounds gender specific, but
family. Can we just say family?
As you've been saying. So some of our Victorian tradie family, I think there's been an element of people have just become a bit desensitized, and so the news, the media, have to employ more and more dramatic tactics to get us to pay any attention to them.
Which only adds to the panic and the overwhelm and the fear and all of those things that we're all currently feeling again. So much of that has come through the lack of clarity around the information that's being given. Oh my goodness, how many conversations have we been part of in the last couple of days where our members are just not clear on what they can and cannot do, and they need to make business decisions. You can't make business decisions without clarity. And we're relying on others to provide that clarity. It's not even clarity we can go and find for ourselves. We have to wait for somebody else to make a decision. And the whole, I guess, language is just such a big motivator towards that panic and fear.
Yeah. And I find it interesting, Coxie, that there was something of a precedent set when the Australian federal government decided what was happening a few months ago as far as restrictions and everything, and I would have thought it made sense to not reinvent the wheel and for a state like Victoria to go, righto, well, we're going back to what we did federally because that worked. So bang, we can just go straight back to it. People know what the rules are because they've been through that before, and for whatever reason that I'm sure none of us will ever understand, the public servants have taken a different approach in Victoria, and sadly it's causing a lot of confusion and fear and future focus.
I feel there was an attempt at least to take it back to where it was and repeat what the federal government had done. However, it was, and I really don't want to get into this podcast the way you and I feel about this, but there were some people that were not prepared to play by the rules. And essentially, like when we're playing a good game of marbles, people aren't prepared to play by the rules. Sometimes it ruins the entire game.
Yeah, well, you don't have a game then. You've just got a free-for-all.
You really do.
Every man and woman for themselves. And again, without straying too far into social commentary and at the Tradies in Business podcast, what we actually want to talk about is how do you deal with this if you're in Victoria, or even if you're not and you're feeling a bit overwhelmed or burdened by what is going on in Victoria and what that might even mean if you're in another state of Australia. Then how can you actually find some sense of control amidst something that seems to be very much out of our control? And I'll sit here in my ivory tower in the Tasmanian bubble, shut off from the rest of Australia because we can't really come and go at all. But it got me thinking, Coxie, about a chat I had with a relationship counsellor many years ago on another podcast about people that end up back in his consulting rooms as a couple with issues again, saying we're back where we started. We're back to where we were before. Only it's worse this time because more time's gone past and we've wasted all of this time. And I really liked the way he sort of distinguished between just circling around and around and around on the merry-go-round, actually suggesting that it's more a spiral and an upward spiral. And that rather than seeing it as a merry-go-round, it's this almost imperceptible spiral upwards where, yeah, you're looping back past the start point, but you've learned some stuff along the way. And it might feel like you're back to where you started or that you've wasted all this time, but you've been learning stuff and you had a go. You know, I mean, he was talking about couples, but you've at least gone away and you've tried some stuff. Now, did it work for at least a little tiny while? And often it would be like, well, you know, this worked for a day or an hour or whatever. And it's like, great, well, let's build on that. Mm. And so I really like that when I even personally feel like, oh, man, we're back to crappy internet again. I could see you shaking your head there a second ago, Coxie. But it's not exactly the same because it's not, because we've moved through that. You know, time has passed. And so I suppose from my perspective, listeners, I would encourage any of you who are feeling like we're back to where we started, or it's even worse, it's like, yeah, and we've learnt some stuff, right? We've learnt that toilet paper doesn't have to run out. And despite some of the restrictions on what we can buy and all that sort of stuff, I feel like even mentally we're a little more prepared because we've been through it before, so it's not just a repeat. Hard to do, but I guess I always found that principle quite helpful.
Yeah, it's a great principle. I haven't heard of that, but it certainly makes a lot of sense when it's verbalized. And I guess what I would like to do on today's podcast in the few minutes we have left, because we don't want to overburden you with long, lengthy rants as we have previously, I'd just like to remind you how you felt the first time around. And I think a lot of those feelings are pretty similar to the ones you're feeling now. And I would again remind you how quickly you were able to move through that space. And a lot of that came with some clarity and some understanding and some better information coming from the government in this case. And I feel that we will have that over the next short period of time so that we can have some greater understanding about what we can and can't do, and therefore can begin planning for what happens next. So just a reminder to remember, yep, it felt horrible. It was quite terrifying. It could be pretty prickly or pineapple-y, as we would use on the podcast here. And it can be stressful, and it can create, you know, sleepless nights, or that yucky feeling so that you can't eat, or maybe you're drinking too much, or maybe you're eating too much because that's how you cope. All of that's very normal. We have been here before. Sure, this time looks a little different, but I feel that with some clarity, we can get you back to feeling, okay, this is uncomfortable, but I can see a direction here.
Yeah. And I'm not going to add anything, Coxie.
Welcome, listeners, to the daily TradieRonaCast, coming into your ears 5 days a week.
Yes.
While we get you through this next little bit, supporting our Victorian family.
And I guess that's something we haven't said is we're stepping up the podcast schedule again, as we did back in April, and coming at you every day of the working week with something that we at least hope is helpful for you, and particularly for our Victorian family. It's potentially a tough time, and I think the fact we've been here before is actually a positive thing, because we can learn from the past in this case. You know, we probably hoped it wouldn't repeat and that we wouldn't have a resurgence. It was always a risk, and here we are. So Coxie and I will come up with some more tips and ideas and ways to help you focus on the present and what you can control today. And that would be my encouragement for anybody who's struggling with any aspect of this COVID situation we find ourselves in, is focus on what you can actually deal with today.
Absolutely.
And we would also encourage you.
I was going to add a whole bunch onto that, and I thought, no, that's perfectly put. I don't need to say anymore.
To go and get some support via all the stuff that Coxie and I do.
Yeah, if you are based in Victoria and you are looking for some extra support, please jump into our big free group. Just search Tradies in Business in the group function on Facebook. We've put an offer in there to try and support you the best way that we know how, and that is with our support. So if you'd like to get more of us in your face instead of just in your ear holes, that's the way to do it. Go there, check it out. You'll see there's a live that you can rewatch at any time. Pretty sure we titled it, "This One's for the Victorians" or something similar. You'll find it there. And please, if there's anything else we can do, please reach out.
Thanks for listening, gang, and take care of yourselves and stay clean.
Take care.
You've been listening to the Tradies in Business podcast with Warwick Bidwell and Nicole Cox. Find out more about today's guest, tools for your trade business, and other cool stuff at tradiesinbusiness.com.au.